Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I go by the name Me, Myself, and I. Epic it was. Remember to like and share to this amazing video. Today I'm here with this amazing gentleman. Before you introduce yourself, I would like to say a very big thank you for always supporting, subscribing, liking, sharing. I'm here with
Dr. Umar Ifatunde. Glad to be here, Ghana.
um Tunde is mostly in the let me say in the Nigeria.
Yes, I was given that name at the Oyotunji African village in South Carolina by a Babalawo of the Nigerian spiritual system. But my Ghanaian name that I was given by uh, Chief Nana Nketiah of the Ahanta people
Okay.
is Nana Payina.
What brought you to Ghana?
Well, number one, I have ancestry from Ghana.
Okay.
Number two, Ghana is the modern home of Pan-Africanism. And number three, I love being here.
You love being here.
I love being in Ghana.
How many African countries have you been so far?
Approximately 17.
Wow. Do you see any differences?
More similarities than differences, without question. I think Ghana's uniqueness lies in the fact that the culture is very much celebrated here, is very much on display. You do not have to look for it. In many African countries, you have to search for the culture. In Ghana, you don't have to search for the culture. It is widely represented and advertised.
How does Pan-African means to you?
Pan-Africanism can be summed up in three simple points. Of course, it's much deeper, much more comprehensive, but for the sake of time, we sum it up in 3 points. Number one, all members of the African race constitute a single family. We should identify on the level of being family first. To be a Pan-Africanist means being African is more important than any other thing I belong to. Being African is more important than my religion. It's more important than my tribe. It's more important than my professional associations. The Africanism always comes first. Number two, as Africa goes, so goes all African people. So the reason that we struggle in the Americas, we struggle in Europe, we struggle in the Caribbean, we struggle in Central and South America and Australia, because Africa is not as strong as we need to help her become so she can look out for us. As Africa goes, so goes all of her scattered Black children. Number three, self-determination. Whatever is to be done for African people must be done by African people alone. We must learn to work and build alone. We must cut the umbilical cord from our colonizers, from our enslavers, and understand that everything we need to repair Africa and African people is inside of us. We need nothing outside of us.
How do we bridge the gap together?
I don't think it's that difficult. I think what keeps us apart is the ignorance. It is the fear. We are afraid of being mistreated, exploited by other African people. But the way that I see it, if we can go through what we went through at the hands of the Europeans, slavery in the Americas, colonization in Africa, if we can survive that, we can definitely survive any short-term setbacks that might come at the hands of other people. The question isn't how do we get past the setbacks. The question is whether or not African people are content living in last place on this planet behind every other group for the next 500 years. If you want to be in a different place, we have to do things a different way.
So we have to do things in different way. Ghana have given over 50, let me say over 50 citizens to the diaspora. What is your take on that?
I think it's a good thing, because when we look at Africa, one of the biggest challenges with Africa is the debt, right? The debt to the Portuguese, the debt to the British, to the Americans, to US aid, to the World Bank, to the International Monetary Fund. If you bring the African of the diaspora back home to Africa, we can invest in Africa, and thereby African countries do not have to continue to accept these parasitic loans that are being pushed into Africa by the European powers. Let Africa in the diaspora, let the diaspora in Africa be the economic solution for the continent, not the Caucasian.
Diasporas are coming back. They're back in numbers to Africa. Being specific, we are in Ghana. What are some of the things that you think they shouldn't carry along when coming to Africa? But being specific, we are in Ghana.
Well, I would say this. All of us coming home or being home need to recognize that we have all been brainwashed to look at each other in a less than African way. So a lot of brothers and sisters from the diaspora are coming home in their right mind, in their right mind. The ones who are not have to be re-Africanized. And it's our job, such as myself, as one of the leaders of the diaspora, to make sure our people come back in the re-Africanized mind. And at the same time, our brothers and sisters in Ghana need to make sure that they are not judging or prejudging their brothers and sisters from the diaspora based on what they've seen on movies and music and television, all of which is controlled by anti-African forces. So all of us need to be careful in how we interact with each other, because we are laying the foundation that is going to dictate where African people be for the next 1,000 years. So it's not about you being Ghanaian. It's not about me being an American African. It's about all of us being members of the ancient African family and doing whatever we got to do that so that our grandchildren's grandchildren will have a better tomorrow because we lived today.
Is it misconception or miseducation some years ago where it wasn't cool to be an African?
Well, I think historically that's always been an issue. But one thing I can say, in the diaspora, we've come a long way ever since the Pan-Africanism of America. Remember, Pan-Africanism was born in the American African. We brought it to Africa. Okay, before W.E.B. Du Bois, Henry Highland Garnett, Alexander Crummell, John Brown Rushworm, Edward Wilmot Blyden, before Du Bois. He's late, right? Pan-Africanism is older than all of them, before Garvey, you see. So Pan-Africanism came from the Americas. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we have grown so much as a result of our Pan-Africanist leaders, our scholars, our authors. Many of us are where we need to be psychologically and politically to re-engage Africa. The time is now.
Well, the time is now. As Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, said, you're not born in Africa because you're an African. You understand? But the African blood is already in you. Maybe I'm not saying it right, but you know what I'm saying, right? In that phrase, what do you think of that?
Well, first, I know Dr. Kwame Nkrumah well, not personally, but he attended college in Pennsylvania. I attended college in Pennsylvania. He used to belong to the UNIA, the Garvey movement in Philadelphia. I grew up in the Garvey movement in Philadelphia. My first book was published on Ghana's Independence Day, March the 6th. My organization, Team Pan-African, was born on Kwame Nkrumah's Earth Day, September the 21st. So he and I share a lot. But with that being said, what it means to me is no matter where you are in the world, if you are African, you are African. Be it. You're not Africanist, you're African. Pan-Africanist, that's our political philosophy. But we are African. And I think it's important that we understand that African means that I can. Because you got Africoons, you got Africans, and you got Africans. Those of us who believe in our ability to win as one people, that makes us Africans.
Wow, that is really deep and that makes me feel goosebumps. Yes, I'm African. You understand? Because I can. You understand? But I can doesn't mean I have to do it alone. We have to do it together as one people. I see you always repping with African clothing. You are always wearing things that are all in Ghana or let me say Africa and all that. What really motivates you to wear all those kind of things, not just the Western clothing?
It came natural. You know, my introduction into Black consciousness was in the 4th grade, 9 years old, which is the number of the ancestors. So this is all I know, right? I've been Black consciousness, African consciousness, Pan-Africanism since a youth.
Wow.
And so I've stayed with it my entire life. So this is who I am, and so it was just natural to me. I really believe that I've curried favor with my ancestors, and a lot of the growing pains that Africans in the diaspora have to experience on the road to re-Africanizing themselves, I never had to go through it. I believe I've always had ancestral guidance that kept me from going through many of the hiccups that a lot of other brothers and sisters go through. Even those born in Africa, I've never had those issues. I've always loved being who I am, and I would never abandon my Africanity for anything.
The energy that you have towards the Pan-Africanism is super amazing. A lot of people doesn't have that, even when they are born in the Western. Well, they don't have that. So where does this, braveness, talking about Pan-Africanism and bridging the gap, Where is that coming from?
I believe it was born in me.
Okay.
I believe it was born in me. I really do. I really do,
And
because
why is it so important for you to bridge that gap?
a house divided cannot stand.
Okay.
And if Africa people do not unite globally, we will lose. Understand, we don't have any friends.
Mm-hmm.
The European is not our friend. The Arab is not our friend. The Jew is not our friend. The East India is not our friend. The Latino is not our friend. African people have no friends, but we don't need them. We are the largest racial group on the planet. It doesn't appear so because so many of us hide behind other non African identities. But when you look at it genetically, we're the largest. Not even the Chinese are as large as African people, but we have to want to be African. And to that point, we have to raise our children to be proud to be African. Race pride is what we need. Slavery and colonization beat that racial ego out of African people, beat it out of us to the point that we identify more with religion than with our race. But as Pan Africanists, we would argue that the racial identity is the most spiritual and the most essential because you can change your religion.
Mm-hmm.
You can leave the church. You can
Yeah.
leave the mosque. You can never stop being African because God made you African. And that's why being African race first for us is a spiritual movement. It's not just political and economic.
Wow, that is really deep. That is really, really deep. A lot of people doesn't really understand the fact that we have to always educate people to understand the fact that we need to do this, because if we don't do it, we will lose our culture. A lot of people, so those people who do not know why you are doing what you're doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, what message will you like to tell them?
I would just like to say that any people who are not proud of who they are have no right to exist and will sooner or later be exterminated. If there is no self respect, there is no claim to the planet itself. And that's why, if you look at Holocaust throughout history, they always sought to eliminate the necessity of the people they helped to exterminate even being on the planet. So if we don't see any interest in being African, why would the world see any interest in allowing us to survive? You must not only be African, you must want to be it, and as much of it as you possibly can. You can never be African enough, because with being African comes spirituality, it comes your economics, it comes your intellectualism, it comes your culture, it comes everything. So when we talk about being African, we're talking about the oldest civilizations in human history. We gave to the world the sciences, we gave to the world the study of God, we gave to the world astrology and zoology. We gave to the world the knowledge of spiritual consciousness. Everything begins with us, and now is the time for us to take it back. I believe it is the destiny of the black man and woman, the African, to reclaim our ancient glory, because we are the only people who can rule this planet in justice. No other race can rule this planet in justice. They can only do it with fear and intimidation. We once ruled the world in justice, and there is no record of another race have ever ruled this planet with justice. Only the African. The Greeks came to Africa because they wanted to. The Romans came to Africa because they wanted to. The Hyksos came to Africa because they wanted to. We didn't have to kill or hurt, enslave or colonize. They wanted to be around us because we were the closest thing on earth to God.
Wow. That is a heavy one, for real. That is a heavy one, and I really appreciate the fact that you are sharing all this kind of, like deepest things that we need to do. It means a lot. If we don't speak about this kind of things, we will end up losing our culture, and we losing our culture. That means that we don't exist in the world anymore. Do you think we are losing our culture in a way coming to different African countries?
I believe that the Caucasian has done a good job
Okay.
manipulating African consciousness to the point that we believe it is better to be rich than to have knowledge of self. We believe that it is better to buy than to know. We have given up culture in exchange for European consumption and materialism. And as a result of that, African people are struggling around the world. In essence, we have forgot who we are. And if we don't recover and remember who we are, we will die a spiritual death as a prelude to a physical one. African people must reclaim their spirituality. We must reclaim our culture, and we must stop taking instructions, advice, and direction from people who we civilized. How can a people you civilized come back to you and tell you what is right or wrong? Cultural imperialism is a very big problem with African people. We're letting people come to Africa and tell us how we should live. You don't ever surrender your control of your culture to outsiders.
How do we win the corruption of Africa?
Well, the world is corrupt.
Okay.
Every government is corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Africa gets all the attention because the world doesn't ever want to see Africa rise, right?
Okay.
The biggest thing for Africa to do is to become transparent. The biggest thing for Africa to do is to give the people a voice in government. The biggest thing for Africa to do is to invest in her own people. Yes, there's corruption, but the US government is corrupt. The British government is corrupt. The German government is corrupt, but nobody's going to talk about that. They're only going to point fingers at mistakes made in Africa. You have good presidents in Africa, right? Of course, there's always room for improvement. But guess what? The way that the European powers actually behave in Africa is they try to corrupt you so they have something on you. So if you don't do what they tell you to do, they'll get you locked up by the world police. You understand me?
Yeah.
Interpol, international police. If you look at it, most of the heads of state that have been persecuted and prosecuted at the level of international government have been African. You mean to tell me none of these white governments are worthy of persecution and prosecution? They invented the world court to sabotage and arrest and destabilize African leaders.
Mm-hmm.
The diaspora returning to Africa eliminates the debt and the dependency on the enslaver. Period.
Period.
If we went no further, then you go further. The diaspora Africans are coming home to invest, to help. You understand? We're not coming back to solve. We're coming to help because we have as much to learn as we have to invest. You understand? That's very important. Very important. So we have to look at that piece. We have to look at the fact that two minds are better than one. So if you marry the intelligence and the culture and the resources of Africa to the intelligence and the struggle and the resources of the diaspora, African people will be a global superpower overnight. The right, excellent, most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey said that if we truly got to understand ourselves today, we'd be a whole new people tomorrow.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining Epic. It was.
Reach Dr. Umar. You can hit me +1-215-989-9858, +1-215-989-9858. Education and psychology is my expertise. Any Ghanaian parents out there who need some advice on their children, autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, intellectual disability, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. Website, drumarjohnson.com. You can email me, drumarjohnson@yahoo.com. Peace and Pan-Africanism.